July 4th, 2022, America turned 246 years old. Happy birthday, my old friend. For Americans with some grasp of history, that amount of time should be comprehensible. For someone like me, it's not difficult at all. My oldest grandfather was born in 1882, just 95 years after the drafting of the U.S. Constitution. That's one less year than my father was alive. He was 96 when he died. For those of you who can't do the math, like me. The bird's eye view goes something like this. Our independence was declared in 1776. The Constitution went into effect 13 years later in 1789. 23 years after that, the War of 1812 began. 14 years later, on July 4th, 1826, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died. Another 35 years brings us to the Civil War. 39 years after that, we're bumping into the 20th century. In another 14 years, World War I began, followed by World War II just 25 years later. Another 25 years found America fully engaged in Vietnam. 10 years after that, Richard Nixon resigned the presidency. Plus 16 years gets us to the first Iraq War. Another 11 gets us to September 11th. 8 more brings us to the first black president, Barack Obama. And 14 years after that, the United States Capitol was attacked. In all, roughly 15 generations of Americans witnessed these events. Now, if you can grasp that amount of time, I want you to know and understand that 246 years is also the exact number of years black people were enslaved here in America. And with that, I want you to do a little thought experiment with me. I want you to imagine that all of America has been a slave nation for the entirety of its existence, all 246 years. But in this America, all Americans have been enslaved, white, black, and brown. Imagine that you and all of your ancestors, parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, great-grandparents, etc., for the last 246 years, all of you, all of us, have had none of the rights guaranteed by our Constitution. Not one. Imagine none of us having the right to worship or not as we wish, to speak our minds freely or protest our plight. For you gun folks, none of you have owned even a squirt gun. Most of us have been kept illiterate. Your entire life, you've had no privacy whatsoever. You've had no property or the right to keep anything you've somehow acquired. Anything you have, anything you feel connected to, can be taken in an instant, including your child and spouse. Indeed, you don't even have the right to marry, and you certainly have no right to justice or access to our justice system. Injustice is your daily bread and butter. Most horrifically, this means that you are subject at the whim of your slaver to cruel and unusual punishment. If you're a woman, your slaver can acquire more slaves by raping you and forcing you to give birth. And let's not forget that you could be worked from sunup to sundown at the end of a whip every day of the week if your slaver wasn't a particularly religious person, without ever receiving a dime for your labor. You could acquire no wealth whatsoever, let alone pass it on to your children or grandchildren for 246 years. 15 generations. Now imagine, all of a sudden you're free. You're most likely still illiterate with no skills beyond what you've acquired on the plantation. You have not a penny in your pocket nor a pot to piss in, as my father liked to say. But fear not, it gets worse, because you still don't have most of the rights guaranteed by our Constitution. And to the extent that you do, the justice system is still heavily weighted in favor of those who've kept you from even seeking justice for the last 246 years. You will not win in court, no matter how good your case. That state of injustice will continue blatantly for all to see for another 100 years before it goes underground, making it even more difficult to expose and fight against. Imagine where you'd be today after those now 346 years. Imagine your government never making any attempt to compensate you for the 246 years of wages it allowed to be stolen from you, let alone the horrors for which there can be no compensation. Imagine the lack of opportunity which continues, making you and yours a permanent underclass, kept from acquiring the kind of generational wealth open to others for now 346 years. Imagine all the ways your life would be different. Imagine all the opportunities you and yours would have missed out on. Imagine how much better off all the people in the surrounding countries would be. People who now blame your culture for your predicament, or suggest that you'd be just as well off as they are if only you'd hunker down, work hard, and make better choices. Suggesting an inferior work ethic or some other character flaw. Now, imagine how you'd feel about America on its 246th birthday. Once again, I'm me. Thanks for watching.